So I'm Naomi. I work in the Gastivists collective, which supports grassroots groups, mostly in Europe, in the fight against new gas infrastructure. And we work with groups outside of Europe through the lens of European accountability. So mostly when European institutions, banks, or companies are involved in exploitive extractivist projects. And so we've been working on the EastMed pipeline for a while, which is a massive pipeline that would go from the sea between Palestine and Israel and Cyprus to take gas from those seas all the way to Italy for European consumption. And that's how we got in touch with allies in Palestine and Israel and wanted to host this event to humanize the situation. There are so many generalizations and simplistic versions of what's going on that we thought to bring stories and people from the ground to this audience would be really valuable and an important conversation. So this is also why we decided to host it in this way with like a big meeting rather than a webinar to all feel more human together with this complicated geopolitical issue that can feel so alienating sometimes. So the wonderful speakers today are Manal from the Stop the Wall campaign, based in Palestine, Ya'ara, who works with One Climate, based in Tel Aviv, and Nidaa, who works with Baladna Youth Association, based in 48 Palestine. And you'll hear what this means, 48 Palestine, along with some other terms soon, and also more about these organizations. So we invite you to use the chat box to share any comments or reflections. Maybe now you want to introduce yourselves, say where you're based. I think it would be nice. And we really, as I said, we want to humanize what can be a very generalized story, and want this to be a space for dialogue and empathy and having a interesting conversation together that feels good. So there'll be totally zero tolerance for disrespectful comments, oppressive behavior, things like this. Yeah, and we think this can be a really nice conversation together. So the flow of this session will be that each of the panelists will give an overview of who they are, what they do, about the collective, and how they see apartheid and climate justice connecting. Manal will also give a brief overview of the political context right now in the region. After that, there'll be some dialogue between speakers, and then about halfway through, we'll have an open space for questions and comments from everybody. And kind of officially, this ends at in an hour, well, around 50 minutes from now. And but if the conversation is flowing and there's still lots more inputs, we had it in mind that all the speakers and myself and Noeli, who's helping with tech support and being on the chat, Noeli also works in the Gastivists with me. We can all stay for another 15-20 minutes afterwards. So totally fine if you want to leave after an hour, but also if the conversation is nice, we invite you to stay. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Manal.
Thank you very much for the great introduction. It's really a pleasure to speak in this interesting and important event, I think. As Naomi mentioned, I work for Stop the Wall campaign. I would like to give you a historical background of how Stop the Wall was created. Stop the Wall was created as, at the beginning, it was a campaign launched by Palestinian environmental NGOs network, or Friends of the Earth Palestine, into of the apartheid wall on our land. And after that, Stop the Wall succeeded in mobilizing popular committees in different parts of the West Bank to fight back against the apartheid wall and resist Israeli settlement expansion activities on our land. In 2004, Stop the Wall, a separate entity, but it remained and is still an observatory member of Friends of the Earth Palestine. We mainly work with communities in what is known as Area C of the West Bank, which constitutes 61% of the lands of the West Bank under full Israeli control between the Palestinians and Israelis in 1993. And this area is a target for Israeli ethnic cleansing. So we work with these communities to strengthen their steadfastness. We also increase solidarity around the world with Palestine, including the solidarity of environmental movements and the groups around the world. I would like to start explaining some of the terminologies in case you're not familiar with them, because I think expressions like 48 Palestine and Zionism, they will be mentioned throughout the discussion by the speakers, including myself. 48 Palestine is the part of 100 Palestinian towns and cities, and after expelling 2/3 of the Palestinian population. This is how it's being, and that was in 1948. So, and is present-day Israel. In 1948, only a few Palestinians remained on that part of Palestine, which constitutes about 78% of the size of Palestine. And 48 Palestinians who remained on their lands, they endured 20 years of military rule. And after the end of the military rule, they entered a new stage of oppression and racism against them. And they still face an entrenched apartheid system against them, being treated as third-class citizens of Israel. And Nidaa, who is based in 48 Palestine, can talk more about what she and my people there encounter. And moving to explain what Zionism means, the establishment of Israel represents the culmination of efforts of the Zionist movement since it was established at the end of the 19th century. The Zionist movement emerged in Europe, mainly in the 19th century, and at the center of the Zionist movement was the creation of a Jewish state, exclusively, of course, to Jewish people on Palestinian land. So from the very beginning, Zionism has been a settler colonial movement. And the practices of Israel today, they are informed by the Zionist vision, which is to eliminate Palestinian existence. Here, it is not necessarily physical elimination. It can be symbolic elimination of Palestinians as a people, as an identity, and as a history. So the Israeli apartheid and settler colonial structure right now, they just are informed and inspired by the Zionist vision and aims to take over the maximum amount of Palestinian land, because our presence on our ancestral land is seen as a contamination of the so-called purity of the Jewish state. So and of course this genocidal and racist to say the least, the racist vision of the Zionist movement can be seen in different Israeli practices, like killing Palestinian people with the murder of more than 248 Palestinians, including 66 children in the Gaza Strip, in the latest brutal attack against my people in Gaza, as a perfect example of that. Israeli oppression is also manifested in home demolition, land theft, arrest of Palestinians all the time, and torture, the construction of the apartheid wall that has fragmented us even more, the attempt to obliterate Palestinian culture, among other practices. Just to talk briefly, I mean, we can talk more about the situation on the ground, but I would like to talk about the developments that have been taking place since the last couple of days. We all know that and Naftali Bennett, who is a new Israeli leader who's now in power, he replaced Benjamin Netanyahu. And Naftali Bennett, he's part or a member of a pro-settler party known as the Jewish Home, while Netanyahu belongs to the Likud, which is a right-wing party. And of course, there is no difference between the two parties, and there is no difference between the two leaders, because the problem does not lie in the persons governing the system. The problem lies in the system itself, which is a structure of settler colonialism and a structure of apartheid targeted against us to ethnically cleanse us from our land. So both the Jewish Home and the Likud, they represent a competition between the extremist far right in Israel and the fascist right. And there is no difference between the two. And just as a proof on that is the flag march that is taking place at the moment in Jerusalem, and that march is led by extremist settlers, and it represents, for Palestinians, we define it as a racist and a violent event that takes place annually, where settlers raising the flags of Israel take to the streets, particularly the streets of the old city of Jerusalem, chanting slogans, anti-Palestinian slogans actually, like death to Arabs, or they call for burning Al-Aqsa Mosque. Today they've been protests by Palestinians to counter this racist event in Jerusalem. And as usual, Israel has met all of that with tremendous use of violence against Palestinians, arresting many others, have got injured, and this scene it repeats itself every time Palestinians protest against Israeli intensified violence and oppression. So I'm gonna stop here. Of course, I would like to talk more about the context and the ground and the recent uprising in Palestine in more details later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so now, Yara, it'd be great to hear from you about One Climate, your anti-apartheid, anti-occupation work, and how this connects to climate justice.
So hi, thank you. Thank you, Manal. It's good to be here. I have to say I'm a bit nervous. So who I am I'm a climate justice activist. I live in Tel Aviv. And for 30 years, I was born into a narrative telling me to hate and fear and feel supremacy over people who I've never met, really, just saw in the news or from politicians and what they have to say. And I'm still going through a process of realizing all of the lies that I've been grown up into. And I think this really connects to me being part of One Climate, which is a new grassroots movement we're working on establishing here between the river and the sea. And our mission is to promote climate justice between the river and the sea, exposing the connection, the direct connection that we see between the need to end the occupation and to promote freedom and justice and recognition of the Palestinian people to have their rights, like their basic rights. So the connection between that and fighting the climate crisis and how that major on humanity is going to impact our lives, everyone here, specifically in the Middle East. I don't know if you know, but the Middle East is a hotspot, environmental hotspot. It means that it's warming faster than other parts of the world. And this has a lot of implications on our lives here. And already today, people are suffering from this. And obviously there are people suffering more than other people. There are a lot of differences. So we know climate justice. I'm guessing people here know the term climate justice from different parts of the world. You know, the differences between the global north and the global south, differences between populations within the US. And for some reason, the discourse about climate justice is not very clear here between the river and the sea, and it has a lot of reasons for that. One of them is because the climate movement in Israel is trying so very hard to be apolitical and not connect the dots and not show the connection between social injustices and environmental injustices and how the two are intertwined. And so a major issue is the occupation that is not being talked within the climate movement in Israel and the environment, and a lot of environmentalists. And we see it differently. We see the direct connection, and we see how we're still going through this journey to really expose the connection, because no one is really talking about it. And a lot of people don't want us to be talking about it in the environmental movement, but also in the Israeli society. But I can give a few examples. So the lives, I mean, Manal and Nidaa can say this much better than me, how Palestinian lives are impacted by the occupation and the inequalities within the Green Line. But you can see that how the climate impact on the Middle East in this area is hurting Palestinian lives more, and how the occupation is preventing from Palestinian lives, Palestinian people to develop resilience to the climate crisis. And a few of the things that Manal just said, like home demolitions and the inability to control natural resources or have the ability to manage water for agriculture or for basic everyday life needs, or even the fact that water is more expensive in South Hill Hebron, Masaf Ariata, as opposed to in Jerusalem. It's like a lot more expensive. Just that is how it just shows to us how the occupation is worsening the lives, worsening the impact of the climate crisis on Palestinian lives. And we believe that the struggle for climate justice is a struggle about how we want to live here. And this piece of land is one piece of land. The borders are invented by humans, and the borders are meant to just keep one people superior as opposed to other people's, and we don't think that reality should be kept going on, and it should end. And the two are like, we cannot promote, we cannot fight the climate crisis without addressing the fact that we, as Israelis, we control other people, and we prevent them for sovereignty. And if we all live on the same piece of land, and this same piece of land is warming faster, then we have to work together, and we have to imagine what kind of reality we want there to be here once we get to the point of no return of the global warming. So that's what we're trying to do. We do a bunch of activities. I don't think I'll go into them right now, but you can follow us and look into what we're doing and support. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think I'll end with that and let Nidaa speak now.
Thank you so much. So over to you, Nidaa, to hear about a bit about your perspective and to learn about Baladna.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Manal and Yara. Well, actually, Manal already said lots of the things that I was about to describe, because I think she framed it in a very good way. But still, it's important also for me to explain couple of things that Manal already mentioned. First of all, my name is Nidaa. I live in the city of Haifa in the 48 regions of Palestine. And I'm the director of a youth organization called Baladna, Association for Arab Youth. My participation recently in the events that took place starting of May were mainly in the city of Haifa, and especially in the protests that took place over there, but I'm also aware of the general situation throughout the 48 and in general in Palestine. So I will be speaking based on that. Before talking, I'm very much interested in focusing on the recent events that happened like recently, the escalation in the region that happened recently. But before talking about what took place on the ground last month, I think it's important that I put what happened in a context and try to clarify that the acts of the states that took place from the Israeli police and were not actually a one-time event or a political failure between the state and its citizens. What we actually saw in May was a scene that is reflective of the relationship between the state and the Palestinian Arab citizens, a relationship that is both colonial and hostile, and this is what actually Manal was trying to describe in her presentation. Let's start first by saying that Israel defines itself as a Jewish and democratic state. This definition is an inherently contradictory one. It's not possible to, on one hand, define yourself as a particular ethnic, that there is a particular ethnic group which is closed and limited to a specific religion, and to give that ethnic group privileges, while on the other hand, they claim that all others are equal, and those others are actually supposed to be us. This contradictory definition on its own determines the relationship between us and between the states. Rights and duties are actually determined based on that and not based on citizenship. And the privileges are granted according to ethnicity, not citizenship, unlike every other country which is supposed to be or claims to be a democratic country. Israel is actually also attacking and outlawed anyone who does not recognize the Jewish state, does not recognize that Israel is supposed to be defined as a Jewish state. Even those who simply call for a democratic state, a normal democratic state, or call for a normal state, which is all of its citizens' state. So even when you claim for more democracy, Israel puts you out of the law and thinks that you should not be legitimized because you are not actually recognizing the definition of the state. Ultimately, the Jewish state is one of the products of the Zionist project. It's not the only product, it's one of the products of the Zionist project, along with occupation, along with the blockade on Gaza and the ethnic cleansing of Sheikh Jarrah and Silwan. So that's why I am sometimes cautious with the terminology that the Palestinian cause is not only about occupation. Occupation is not the only word that we could use in order to describe the situation here. Especially when we are also speaking about Palestinians in the 48, that some people could say we are not occupied. It's a matter of equality and citizenship. So that's why it's important to clarify the different faces and the different reflections of oppression. Everything that we face as Palestinians, actually, no matter where we are, is a reflection of a singular system of repression. Although the system may use different methods, the aim is the same, is to ensure dominance of one ethnic group over another, that is to steal actually the resources and rights of the Palestinians and grant them as privileges to the white colonizer. This is the framework that is important for me to stress. And this is actually what Manal started to describe in her presentation. Now, to be more specific, regarding the Palestinians in the 48 regions of Palestine that I'm part of, we will not now go through the whole history with this very limited time, but I would like to make note of a few things. Actually, since the second Intifada in 2000, Israel approach toward the 48 Palestinian society has been taking two parallel tracks. On the one hand, it has sought to control the Palestinian society national, political behavior and identity, which is the oppression that we are facing, and which is like what mostly is people are familiar to. To name a few examples of how Israel does this, actually going after national and political organizations. So only recently, we saw the brutal response to the May uprising, which resulted in thousands of arrests of young people and protesters. Representing national identity, oppressing national identity. For example, I would take the example of the last statement of the Minister of Education, Gallant, who said recently a statement saying that they would prevent any group, including NGOs, that does not recognize the state of Israel or name it as an apartheid, to enter schools and to work with students. And as a youth organization, we were facing this difficulty because we have to align with the mainstream and not to criticize it and not to bring another narrative or another story other than the mainstream in order to enter schools and to work with young people. Another way, in addition, is of course the racist legislations, such as the Nakba law, which denies state funding to any group or organization that participates or holds any activities to remember or commemorate the Nakba. Another example is the state national law, the Jewish national law, and there is not that much to say about it. It's very clear. What is important to clarify, however, is the second track that Israel is very much focusing, especially after the second Intifada. And since then, Israel has worked, actually, we could say, to buy off society economically by trying to separate the national issue from the reality of daily life. Israel tries to delude the people in the Arab society, and especially the young generation, into believing that they can change their daily living conditions without transforming the structure of the state. It adopts new liberal policies under the slogan of bridging the gaps. These socioeconomic policies, however, will never bridge the gaps, since they do not question the political status of the 48 Palestinians, which is at the heart of the economic disempowerment of the Arab society inside Israel. On the contrary, the policies are not even so much as like focused on the economic development of the Arab society. Rather, they are focused on integration in the margins of the Israeli economy. Often these policies have political strings attached. So for example, recently they just issued governmental plan in order to combat crime, escalation of crime in the Arab society, or one other big financial social plan that just simply bombed millions of shekels to the local municipalities, but they would all the time condition it with political prices, such as encouraging young Palestinians to be part of the police, of the Israeli police, or the Israeli civil service. So these two tracks actually go together, and it's very clear, especially after 2000. We can only, I'm mentioning that because it's important to understand what was happening recently in May in light of this. So we can only understand what happened in the last month only in light of this context. What happened was that Palestinians, despite all the state attempts to repress and contain our national identity, what we did is to express that we are part of the Palestinian people. We expressed that the direct and awful repression in Sheikh Jarrah is directed to all Palestinians, and that we say that the displacement of the Palestinians in their homes that is taking place in Sheikh Jarrah, and previously even like years before in Silwan, is something that we ourselves are facing. Actually, the same practices that Israel employs against Palestinians in Sheikh Jarrah take place in different ways also in the 48. Today, for example, there are tens of unrecognized villages in the Naqab in the south. The state of Israel has long sought to displace the families living in these villages and to concentrate them in Bedouin township in the Naqab, so that they could confiscate the land and simply build Israeli settlements on the same land. In addition to this, Israel employs a policy of home demolitions, through which it destroys and displaces us from our homes, using the excuse that these homes are not licensed, we do not have permits, or it's not authorized. Why? Because Israel actually refuses to expand Arab localities and issue building permits. Since 48, there were no single Arab Palestinian city or a new village since 48. So when we build in our land, they simply destroy it because it's not authorized, but they do not want to authorize our lands in a way that we could even build a house there, our houses there. I'm finishing, I know it's somehow beyond the 5 minutes. Like simply what I'm trying to say, that the brutality and the arrests and everything that we have myself confronted in the last events in May and up to now, we cannot actually explain it unless we understand this whole structure. And actually Israel was practicing that because we were standing up in order to express our identity. So what happened is that they arrested more than 1,500 young people, and they are now intimidating like 200 young people. Lots of them are actually below the age of 18. Ultimately, it's in order to repress the expression of our national identity and the feelings of social solidarity. And I'm finishing with this because I think this is something that we are all as Palestinians recently experiencing, and I would tell especially in the 48, we are experiencing this feelings and sense of solidarity that not necessarily was the case before the latest events. So many emergency committees were created in the last events. I'm living in Haifa, so I was noticing like how many emergency committees and the protection committees against the extremist attacks on our houses. We are noticing, we are seeing that there are lawyers who are volunteering into committees. So there is a sense of solidarity inside society, of organizing inside society. And therefore, this expression of identity and this cohesion and this solidarity that we are witnessing recently is what makes Israel very much upset, because it worked very systematically in order to dismantle any kind of cohesion and any kind of internal fabric and societal fabric inside society, and to make us like simply individuals who are determining, who are living in a very individualistic and consumptive lifestyle, in addition to fragmenting us into religions and towns and the small segments of society. So I think that the brutality and the attack that we are facing right now is mainly because of this. However, they are trying to reflect that to the outside world, because we are, sometimes they would even use the term anti-Semitist, because we are like protesting because for what is happening regarding housing and uprooting people from their houses. So I will finish with this with a positive sense, because I think this is the atmosphere currently in the 48. However, we are witnessing and experiencing a brutal attack from the police and the different systems. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nidaa. And I'll ask follow-up question about very connected, really inspired by what you were saying about identity. In the meantime, I invite all the participants, if you have a question or a comment, to be typing it in the chat box. And the next part of this talk will be Noélie will select a few questions and comments and read them out, and the speakers will respond to them. So during this next section, feel free to be typing there if you wish. So indeed, there are so many different identities that are often very fragmented, and that's really why together we thought it'd be very powerful to bring together the three different identities on of the speakers on the panel. I forgot to say at the start, I myself am Jewish and Israeli and based in Europe. And lots of the participants here, we promoted this webinar a lot in networks that are in the European climate justice movement. So I'm curious to hear from the speakers about what different powers do you see lying within these different identities of being based in Europe, based in Palestine, based in 48 Palestine, based in Israel, the different identities people occupy, and perhaps because we haven't heard so much about it so far, especially people based in Europe, what's Europe got to do with this historically, and how can people on the ground in Europe support the fight against apartheid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I start, or Nidaa, you'd like to?
No, just go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Nidaa. It was really a great speech, and you've highlighted many different issues. Especially, I'd like to comment on, before answering the question raised by you, Naomi, I'd like to comment on the recent uprising, the May uprising, or what we Palestinians called the Unity Uprising. And they described how Palestinians or how Israeli plans to disconnect Palestinians in 48 from the rest of the Palestinian people, how Israel has been implementing brainwashing programs against you in the 48, and how all of that has just failed when people took to the streets, raising the flag of Palestine, and also emphasizing that they are part of the larger Palestinian people. You also talked about the different forms of oppression practiced by Israel against us, and I could, of course, find, regardless of the legal framework subjugating us, you are third-class citizen of Israel. I'm Palestinian living in the West Bank under Israeli military occupation. So the legal frameworks are different, but the practices are really similar to each other. We have like communities, like the unrecognized communities in the Naqab that face similar practices, apartheid practices to ethnically cleanse them. We face the brutality of the Israeli occupation and an intensified arrest campaign. But despite of that, what I want to emphasize is that we've been taking to the streets since weeks. Although it might sound like an immediate response to what has been happening in Jerusalem and the brutal attack against the besieged Gaza Strip, that's true, but we've been also protesting decades of oppression, decades of apartheid, and the dehumanization. And here, I think I always think to myself that our resistance and the uprising represents the cracks in Israel's visible and invisible walls of discrimination, exclusion, and oppression. And I think these cracks is our desire to live in dignity and to live in freedom, because we've been denied that since decades. And here I'm going to draw on the historical role of Europe. Colonial powers, or 70 years ago, which still hold on to the colonial legacy in Europe. They've been waging a war on Palestine since more than 100 years. And the complicity of these colonial powers has started the moment when they embraced the Zionist vision, which is, as I said, it's a genocidal and racist vision based on the superiority of one racial group against the other. And while Europe has like pretended that it has like a kind of support for the Jewish people after centuries of oppression, which is totally untrue, because Zionism is an anti-Semitic movement, because anti-Semitism is about white supremacy, it's about racism, and it's about a process of otherness, where when one person or one racial group is better than the other, and based on that, everything is determined, including the lives of those who are considered inferior. So Europe, or colonial powers, and here particularly I'm talking about Britain, in fooling the world that they are helping the Jewish people, but they are not doing so. It's because the support of Israel, which started since the Balfour Declaration, where the Foreign Secretary of Great Britain at that time in 1917 has declared that he's promising the Jewish people a state in Palestine, and he emphasized in one of his speeches or statements that they are going to do so without consulting the wishes of the native population living in the land on which Israel was established. And he also said that regardless of the fact that the Zionist movement is bad or good, what we should think of is the present and the future, because it resonates with the imperialist vision of the West, which still, as I told you, although we think that colonialism has ended, but it is still in place in the minds of too many, and even the practices, but it takes different forms now, of too many white supremacists.
Yeah.
The West. And either in the UK or other countries, and now the US is taking the lead in supporting Israel. They are complicit in Israeli apartheid and in the oppression of Palestinians through supporting Israel economically, through projects like the EastMed pipeline or the Euro-Egypt interconnector, which would only strengthen the economy of Israel, and are all forms of complicity with Israel. And this also reinforces Israeli impunity. And when Israel will continue oppressing us, will continue dehumanizing us. So here I would like to have the opportunity to call on you as environmental activists, or just as people living in the West, to try to pressure your governments to end Israeli impunity, and to adopt the BDS call for boycott, divestment, and sanctions on Israel, because it is our way. The BDS call is a way to delegitimize. It's a way to dismantle Israeli apartheid and settler colonial structure, and also it is a way to support the struggle for climate justice, because our anti-colonial struggle and the struggle for climate justice are intertwined, because Israel has been destroying our environment in order to colonize our land. I don't think I had the time to discuss or to highlight how Israel destroys our environment in order to take over more Palestinian land. But if we have time, I can explain more.
Manal, I would suggest, like, I have also a lot to say, but I will restrict myself, and maybe we could use the time, Naomi, remaining time for questions, if like to have questions from people participating in the webinar, and we would be happy to answer it.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you, Nidaa.
Yeah, absolutely. And a reminder that for anyone who can stay, we can stay for about 15 minutes longer than the original end time. Leah, would you perhaps like to read out your question?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Leah. I am from Urgewald, a German climate and human rights organization. And thank you for your presentations. I would like to know if one of you would talk a bit about the efforts in campaigning against the planned Reindeer gas-fired power plant.
The what?
The Reindeer gas-fired power plant. The power plant, it's also known as Eastern Station. Is the one that is being proposed to be built close to the Green Line.
I would have to say honestly, transparently, that we as a youth organization, we have different focus. However, we see the linkage, of course, between environmental struggle and our political struggle as very much interlinked, but on the practical level, we are less involved. So I would rather give the floor probably for people who are more involved in such campaigns.
Okay, thank you, Nidaa.
I can say a bit about it. Unfortunately, I'm not personally involved in that struggle because there are too many injustices going on here and not so many people to fight against the regime. I know it's a struggle that is cooperation between the different cities, that the power plant is supposed to be built. There are differences, of course, of the impact of the pollution of this. It's whoever doesn't know, it's a fossil gas power plant that is supposed to be built. If I'm not mistaken, Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, but near Kfar Qasim, or is it in a different place? But it's right, it's supposed to be right on the border of the Green Line, closer to Palestinian villages than Jewish municipalities. But and this is like a clear climate justice issue on how, and I think a way to see how capitalism and Zionism are very much combined and are supporting one another as systems of keeping power imbalances aligned to allow these two systems to keep staying alive on the backs of people. So this power plant, there is a fight right now. The people living in these villages are fighting together from what I've known and heard so far. It's part of a bigger, very pro-fossil fuel energy policy the Israeli government is pushing, like the East Med pipeline, but other major projects that are all for fossil gas, mostly for export to Europe. So just as an answer to Naomi's question, one thing you can do as Europeans is to put pressure on the European Union to stop supporting all these projects and to put pressure on European companies to whitewashing the occupation and keep polluting the people living in the Middle East, because like I said, we are going to be more vulnerable to the impact of the climate crisis than other parts of the world. So that's about the Siemens struggle, and they have a website, I think, and I think you can reach out to them if you want to cooperate. I can help create a contact to them if you'd like.
Awesome, thank you. And on that note, we can also share with all the participants, we have your email addresses, and we'll share a follow-up email with contacts and the pages of all the organizations, so you can look them up and things like this, if there are next steps like this proposal to be in touch about Siemens, and I see in the chat coordinated action proposal. So for sure in the follow-up, we'll make some space for this. And in our promotion materials, we said that this talk would last an hour. So if you'd like to leave now, if you're planning to leave now, please don't feel impolite to drop off and do so. But I think if it's still okay for Nidaa, Yara, and Manal, that we keep going with some questions for 15 minutes or so. It's okay? Awesome. So I see a question from AC Europe. Would you like to take off the, actually they're here in the room with me, by the way. It's AC is an organization. Anyway, but would you like to unmute and say the question?
Oops. You have to move.
I have muted.
Oh.
I'll do the question. I'll read it out. Sorry, technical difficulties from Amsterdam. So it's two questions. So being that the Zionist movement also in the beginning was supported by anti-Semitic powers like Russia, where there was an attempt to displace Bolshevik Jews, how does the anti-colonial and anti-apartheid movements tackle some countries in Europe which supports the conflict, also with weaponry, for merely strategic purposes and not for supporting the Jewish people? And secondly, can someone speak a little bit about how the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, is being addressed by the climate activist movement right now? And are they related directly to the recent attacks?
Could you, like Naomi, if you can you, because we cannot necessarily hear the question properly. Can you like explain it a bit? Like I cannot get the questions.
Sure, I can try. It's also in the chat, by the way. If you open up the chat function. So I think the first question is more about how, if there are examples of how anti-colonial and anti-apartheid movements confront and target countries in Europe that support the conflict, that support the Israeli regime, for example, with weaponry. And especially highlighting that they do this, it's not because they are supporting the Jewish people, it's to profit from the oppressive Jewish state. So that's one question. And the second question is about the Jewish National Fund, if they're being targeted by anyone, and if they're involved in the recent siege.
Can I comment on the first? Sorry, go ahead, Nidaa.
Well, I want to regard to the first question, though not directly. I think that the relations between countries are not. It's not determined according to based on interests, and not based on values and political terms as the ones that we are currently discussing. Personally, and I think that lots of the Palestinian people are starting to believe that in order to transform the situation, more interest should be directed to people, to community advocacy, and less to the formal level. The formal level seems to be the political formal level seems to be very stagnating, including the Palestinian formal level represented by the Palestinian Authority, that we think is very much restricted to the Oslo Agreement and has a very limited potential and the space to move as well, speaking also of the economical component. So we think as active, I'm not representing anyone, but I'm trying to convey some of the atmosphere in the Palestinian community, both in the 48 and other places, that we do not think that something could be changed on the formal level, but rather on the popular level, on the community level, and on the long term, something could be probably transformed on the formal level, but starting from the place where very much capitalist interests are the motivators and the factors that are determining the relations is not something that I think that not something that we as Palestinians are thinking that we could transform anything there, and at least currently. I think parallel to this that we have a lot of work to be done internally as Palestinians. Unfortunately, we lack a Palestinian liberation project. We lack a project that all parties and everyone is recruited to, and this really make us less organized and less oriented and with less capacities to change lots of things on the international level. So my own perspective that any change should start first of all now by organizing the internal Palestinian house, by building our capacities and by organizing our institutes and by framing our political project in a way that everyone is aware what our aim is. And second, to target the community and popular level internationally. And first of all, to target it in order to convey the Palestinian issue as a liberation issue and not a discussion about borders and not a humanitarian case. Unfortunately, the Palestinian cause started to be recently only humanitarian cause, and also a negotiation about borders and details, and it should be illustrated again as a liberation cause. And this is in one hand. In the second hand, there is another duty that we also have, is to try to bring to the table other solutions and discourses, and apart from the mainstream one, which is the two-state solution. This is the dominant, this is the mainstream solution, which is discussed in the international level, and even the formal international level, who are like somehow, I don't want to say pro-Palestinian, but less pro-Israeli. Even those ones are also endorsing the two-state solution. That me, myself, and lots of fragments inside the Palestinian society started to realize recently that this is not a way and a solution that could transform the colonization, because it does not necessarily balance the power relations, but rather try to manage it instead of balancing it. So I'm trying to touch your question from different angles and not from the exact angle that you raised, because I think that these are the main areas that we should be more focusing, which are organizing internal Palestinian issues, targeting the popular level internationally, and trying to promote a discourse which is not necessarily the mainstream discourse, which is a discourse that says that privileges and the supremacy should be totally erased and eliminated in order to have real justice. And here I'm borrowing also the term from climate justice. Justice cannot be really in place as long as there are power imbalances in the region.
Okay. Can I add one more thing? Yeah. I agree with Nidaa on the internal problems we have in regard to the national liberation movement in Palestine. It's been inactive since the signing of the Oslo Accords, due to different political and mainly political factors, either through the intervention of powers, Western powers, or due to our limitations, and in addition to Israeli control over our lives. But I would like to highlight the fact that the BDS movement, which was created in 2005, represents the aspiration of the Palestinian people in regard to the project of decolonization and liberation. So it can be, in a way or another, it can be an anti-colonial or an anti-apartheid movement, and the BDS tries to change opinion around the world towards Palestine, and attitude actually towards Palestine / Israel, and it focuses on dismantling the apartheid system that has been in place since decades in order for Israel to fulfill its settler colonial objectives. So here, and as Nidaa perfectly said, the power lies within the people themselves, because governments care about interests, not about values. So this is why we, the BDS movement, and we as Palestinian grassroots organizations, we focus through our actions, and when we want to increase solidarity with us, we focus on the people, because we believe in the power of the people. And we urge you to pressure your governments in order to recognize Palestinian rights. And part of recognizing our basic human rights is to call Israel out for what it actually is. It's an apartheid regime, period. And based on that, to pressure the international community in the UN to recognize Israel as an apartheid state and to reactivate the apartheid mechanisms against Israel, to impose sanctions, targeted sanctions on Israel, to boycott the products of Israeli settlements, and to impose a military embargo in Israel, actually to support our anti-apartheid and anti-colonial struggle in the same way the South African people were once supported by the international community to end the apartheid regime. So I think that that's an important form of support and a step forward in order to help us end the oppression that we have been encountering since decades. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I wonder, Yara, if you have also some feelings on this question, and then after that, soon we'll wrap up.
Yes. Yeah, so I'll address JNF, and then I want to follow up on what Manal just said, which is really important and inspiring, and I think like the point of this webinar. So I'll get back to that. JNF, so the question was, were they involved in the siege directly, and what can we say about them? So from as far as we know, they aren't involved directly or in a transparent way to the siege and everything that has happened in the past month. JNF is an extension of the Zionistic movement for years. And it's a body that de facto is promoting environmental racism because they use their tools to, for example, establish reserves, like natural reserves on Palestinian villages in order to I'm like translating directly from Hebrew, would Judify the area, so create more areas for Jews, or more lands that are grabbed and held by the Israeli government, the Israeli regime. So, and it's done by just establishing natural reserves. So it's not like they built a new Israeli village or a new Jewish village. They so to the Israeli public or to the international eye, it could pass by something very positive, right? We want to have more natural reserves and to support more natural areas, but it's done on the backs of people and on existing villages. So that is one thing. JNF, they are part of dispossession and ethnic cleansing in East Jerusalem and Silwan specifically. And regarding so if the climate movement is doing anything about it, like I said in the beginning, unfortunately, the climate movement in Israel, there's a lot of work to do on it. In like majority, it's pro-pragmatic way of looking at things, anti-political, not to connect between different struggles. So the majority of the climate movement in Israel would want to work with any government, even if it's a fascist government, alt-right government, as long as it's promoting environmental regulation and doing what it can do on the climate crisis for Israelis, then the environmental movement is fine with that. Not everyone. There are groups like us fighting against this and trying to expand the discourse, but it's a lot of work, and we're not there yet regarding how the movement is working. But there are groups in the anti-occupation movement that are focusing on JNF and are starting to organize campaigns against it. Stay tuned on that, because there will be something happening, I think, in the near future, and we can update you on that. And I just want to say one last thing as a follow-up to Manal, that I think it's not only that the global actors and The European Union and the US and the UN and everyone should call out to end the occupation and to end the apartheid regime. I think the most important part is doing things like this, inviting people from the ground, inviting Palestinians, inviting people fighting the regime to talk and say what is actually happening here, and bringing the complex reality that is here, and not trying to impose solutions from the outside that the European eye thinks that should be done. It needs to be the people here, especially the ones who are the most impacted by the situation, navigating the way. And your job, in my opinion, is to give the platform and to support and strengthen these voices, like this webinar, for example. So that is just one addition I wanted to add to Manal.
Thank you so much. And now I'm going to bring us a bit to a close. Thank you to everyone for lasting this long with us. And thank you so much, the amazing speakers. It's so powerful to hear you and have this opportunity. We had one question from Laura that I'd really quickly like to respond to about when in European groups, Palestine solidarity work gets labeled as anti-Semitic. And we were, the organizers of this event were accused of being anti-Semitic for organizing this. So we really thought of how do we respond? And it was clear to us that Palestinian liberation is tied up with Jewish liberation. It makes a juster world for everybody. And as Manal was saying, Zionism is anti-Semitic. And to conflate criticism of the state of Israel with criticizing Judaism is, that conflation in itself is anti-Semitic.
Can I add one sentence on this regard?
Sure. Yeah.
I two things actually. The first thing that I think that there is always a misuse of terminology, that people are not necessarily Palestinian people or any activist is guilty for that, but it's all the time important to make the distinction between Jewish people and Zionism, and this is very unclear borders, and even in the education that we try to do internally inside the Palestinian society here, we all the time make sure to clarify that there is a difference between the two. We know that this is manipulated, and we know that when we are accused for being anti-Semitist or people or activists in Europe are demonstrating with the Palestinian cause, it's manipulated in order to delegitimize this struggles. But however, I still think that this education and the discourse of making difference between Judaism and Zionism should all the time be active and be on the table, because it's like me myself personally, I see that our struggle is also even to make the occupier and the colonizer get rid of his supremacy. Like part of the liberation is to liberate the oppressor from his supremacy. So I see our struggle, I see as part of our struggle is to make Zionist people give up their supremacy, which is also harmful for them and not only for the victims, which are the Palestinian people. So I think that sometimes we should try to touch this gray lines in between, and not be only in the reaction position, where we try to say no, we are anti-Semitist or Semitist or whatever. So I think that the issue of terminology and the fact that liberation is something that liberates everyone, and not only the deprived or the ones who are in a less privileged place, can sometimes contribute to this discussion.
Thank you very much. And on this note, I say a massive thank you to the panelists, to Noélie on the tech support, to our co-organizer organizations, Young Friends of the Earth and Recommon, based in Italy, and to all the participants. Thank you so much. And we'll be sharing a follow-up email in the next few days with this recording and the links that were shared here, maybe some more. And yeah, huge thank you and have a really nice evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.